Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Welcome to Bonn Park. This is Sara Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward.
And today we have Christa Wise.
Yeah, Christa is a science student at the University of Guelph, and she's majoring in zoology. And she's one of thousands of Canadians living with Lyme disease, which is an infection transmitted to humans through the bite of an infected tick.
Yeah, there's a lot in the news over the last couple of years about let's watch out for ticks. Here's where you could run into ticks, what you should do when you encounter a tick. But also more recently, Justin Bieber has been in the news coming forth saying that he's been struggling with Lyme disease. And it's been quite a battle for him, as has Avril Lavigne in past years and Canadian icon Shania Twain.
Christa is also a director at large for the National Wildlife Rehabilitation Foundation, and I'm looking forward to her sharing her long, arduous, and emotional journey towards recovery of Lyme disease and hearing much more about her passion for biology and nature.
Yeah, I'm really interested in hearing about her zoology program.
Yeah, me too. Let's talk to her.
Okay. Hey, Christa, we're so happy you're here to tell your story. Marshall, do you want to tell us how you guys met?
My oldest daughter, Mason, goes to school with Christa's younger sister. Over a year ago, there was kind of a spot open in my car for car rides home. And Christa would occasionally grab that seat and jump in the front seat while my daughter and her sister would sit, or my sister sit in the back. And so I had watched Christa grow up because she went to KW Bilingual School along with her younger sister and younger brother. So I kind of saw her along the way growing up anyways. And I knew that she had Lyme disease and was in high school finding a way to deal with her Lyme disease while still moving forward. And so when she would sit in the car, we'd drive home, which was like a 5-minute ride home. We'd chat, and I was really curious about it. I did not know a lot about Lyme disease at all, other than I heard that Canadian pop singer Avril Lavigne had Lyme disease, but I really didn't know anything about it. So I'd ask her a question or two, and she'd be really forthcoming about it. But I always wanted to hear more about it and know more. But the next time I'd see her, so what happened was we'd just chit-chat really easily. And I learned that Christa has just an incredible passion and love for animals and nature and biology and animal welfare and animal science and all those things. So we talk about those things as well. And along with her courses in school. Anyways, I just really enjoyed her company, even though it was in like little 5-minute segments with a lot of noise around us. And but every so often I would keep kind of asking. I wanted to know more about her journey with Lyme disease. And the more she told me, the more I just became more and more interested in how arduous and how lengthy the experience was. So I thought that's what we talk about today here with her, right from the start. How did you get Lyme disease? And even her definition of what Lyme disease is. And then talk about where she is now with it.
Well, it's definitely true that nobody knows more about it in this room than you do, so Christa. So are you cool with that? Do you want to let us know sort of your story, what happened beyond
definitely.
the article that we've read?
Yeah, so I first got sick. It starts back in 2014. I believe January 5th, 2014 was when I kind of, it was Christmas break, just near the end. And I started getting, I think I got kind of like flu-like symptoms. I wasn't feeling great. A few days passed, and then, I still wasn't getting better. So we went to the doctor, and I had pneumonia. So I got some antibiotics for that. Was kind of being treated for that for a while. The pneumonia went away, but a lot of my symptoms stayed. They just didn't go away. I had bad headaches, just really bad headaches. I was really just physically exhausted all the time. And that was kind of my main symptoms that started. And a few other kind of like flu-like symptoms, where like sometimes you were just kind of sore, not having much energy.
Stuff that you can probably easily dismiss to a bad bug, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's just, okay, I'm just, haven't quite kicked this thing fully. My body took a bit of a hit because it was a bit more severe pneumonia. And then just as time went on, I went back to school. And kind of end of January, it's like, okay, I'm still not better. I was still missing some school. because I wasn't attending all the time because, of course, I'm feeling kind of sick. Yeah, and so for the rest of grade 8, it just didn't go away. Like, it just kept getting progressively worse and worse and worse. So I went to see a couple different doctors. Of course, I saw my family doctor. He wasn't really sure what was going on. I believe I went to the hospital, like the emergency room, a few times just because the headaches were so debilitating and I was just so sick. And just complete lack of energy. I couldn't do anything. Most days I couldn't really leave the couch. I couldn't leave my bed. Things like that.
I find myself sympathizing with your parents right now, just trying to fix this for you. I don't want to interrupt your story.
No, I completely get that. Yeah.
Okay.
That's something that my parents definitely struggled with as well because they didn't know what was going on. Of course, I didn't know what was going on. And at the time I was 14,
right.
Just turned 15, trying to finish up my grade 8 year. And, it was just this horrible, debilitating illness that no doctor seemed to be able to figure out. I saw a pediatrician at Grand River Hospital, and she wasn't very helpful, to be honest. A lot of times when I went into the emergency room, the doctors weren't very helpful. They couldn't really say, well, we don't know what it is. We'll give you this, but we don't know if it'll help. We don't know what's wrong. I got referred to a lot of specialists, like the pediatrician at Grand River. I went to some doctors at St. Mary's as well. And it was just kept coming back, we don't know what it is. I had so many testings, so many tests done. And it just progressively got worse and worse as time went on. And come time to go into high school, we still had no idea what was going on. And we just worked towards, trying to get in to see more specialists. Midway through grade 9, I believe I was seeing on a regular basis a neurologist at McMaster. And he also didn't know what it was. I was basically, over the course of a year, I was probably on a new medication every couple months.
Oh, that sounds rough.
Yeah, I was on every family of migraine medication that they could give me. I tried everything. I had some really fun side effects from those. I would be looking at my paper and the whole paper would start vibrating, moving towards my face back and forth. And it was, not a great time. I'm a very tall, thin, I was a very tall, thin teenager. And so I had very low blood pressure to start with.
Right.
And they put me on a migraine medication that was a beta blocker, which lowers your blood pressure. So I came very close to passing out most times when I stood up from a chair.
Wow.
So the doctor pretty quickly took me off that one. But it was just a really long process. I had MRIs done. I think I probably had 4 MRIs done, which I will say MRIs are great when you have a headache because they put you into this giant tube.
Yes, it's incredibly loud. I can definitely attest to that.
Loud.
Yeah.
And so, when you're in there for 20 minutes, and it's just these massive noises going on. But so got quite a few of those done. I actually had a lumbar puncture done because at one point they weren't sure. Maybe it was low spinal fluid.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was also not a very pleasant experience. A lot of these were not very pleasant. So I got slightly, it wasn't an anesthetic, but it was kind of relaxants, and then they stick the needle into your between your spine to collect the fluids. Wasn't that, so that was also not very fun next few days, because when you have low spinal fluid it causes headaches, which is why they thought that's what I had. But when you take spinal fluid, now you have low spinal fluid. So then that was not a fun week after that, when I was just vomiting and nauseous, and my headache was 10 times worse. And and fast forward, I went to see specialists at Sick Kids, and all throughout this time through high school, grade 9 and into grade 10, I was only attending maybe 2 days a week.
Wow. Okay.
I was not able to go to class. I was not able to attend class. In grade 9, I believe I missed all of December.
Right.
Because I didn't go that whole month. Just because the headaches were so bad and so crippling, and fatigue. And I was sleeping probably 10 or 12 hours a day. And then just, laying on the couch, watching TV, not being able to do anything. I couldn't read, I couldn't do anything like that. And so, of course, doing homework was also not an option, really. Yeah, and it just became very difficult to figure out, how to manage high school and being very chronically ill. And fortunately at secondary school, unfortunately, the vast majority of the teachers there were amazing. Had a great guidance counselor, and they were all very nice, very accommodating. Again, except for, of course, a few exceptions. But
It's always the case.
yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was very happy, kind of like how good the teachers were. They were always fine with taking a partial course load. So I was only taking 2 courses a semester,
Okay.
and then also only being able to attend 2 days a week. Yeah, and then eventually what happened is that I, after all these tests and all these specialists and, driving to Toronto and Hamilton and, missing school to go to doctor's appointments and things like that, I went to a naturopath to try to see if I could get some help with some of the fatigue stuff. Because I had done a sleep study as well, and they couldn't find anything, I didn't have sleep apnea or anything like that could potentially contribute to feeling tired all the time. So I went to the naturopath to see if maybe, kind of like the last ditch effort of
For
like,
sure.
come on,
Like,
someone's got to be able to
somebody
help.
give me a hand. Yeah.
And within kind of 5 minutes of talking with her, her name's Tina. I forget her last name.
Is
but
it Rogers?
Yes.
Yeah, I know
Yes,
her.
Tina Rogers. But yeah, no, Tina Rogers, she is amazing.
She
Within
is.
about 5 minutes of being in there, talking with her, she kind of stops us, like I was with my mom, she kind of stops us and looks at me and said, okay, do you, she kind of rattled off a list of symptoms. She's like, do you have, so like you say you're always tired. Do you sometimes like have difficulty thinking? Do you like your kind of joints just kind of like hurt kind of like unexpectedly? You don't really know why, sore and like all these different kinds of things, like a slight stutter and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, these are all things I had. A lot of these things that I hadn't even told her about yet.
Right.
And these were things that she's like, yeah, you have Lyme disease.
Go Tina.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so I was like, okay. And that was very interesting to me because I had been tested for Lyme disease in Canada already.
That was going to be one of my follow-up questions where how is this missed or how,
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard it's very hard to diagnose
Yeah.
because of these wild symptoms that come
Yeah.
and go and take over your life. What is the test and why was the first one clear, I guess?
Yeah, so that's the thing is that kind of some of the issues that happen in Canada, the test is not that great. I believe it's a 2-stage test, but I don't remember the exact nuances of the details of it. But basically, the one in Canada is not that great. It doesn't test for like all the strains or anything like that, or nearly as many as the one in the US tests for. As well, the one in Canada does not, it's not very good at detecting early stages. So because it looks for antibodies, not the actual bacteria in your body. So it's your body's response to an infection. So that usually takes like 6 or 7 weeks, sometimes more, for your body to even produce those. And even sometimes after that, you can still, like the test can still come back negative even though you have it. Yeah, and so that's when Tina told me about like, okay, you have Lyme disease. That's when I that's when she suggested, pay the $700 or $600 or whatever to get tested in the States.
And at this point, you and your parents are probably like, oh, I'll cut off my arm. Like,
Yeah,
we need
exactly.
to know what's
Yes.
happening here. Yeah.
Exactly. So like it was just like, okay, if this is going to give us an answer, we'll just pay the money and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that came back indicative of Lyme. So it's like, okay, well now we know I have it. It wasn't like a super duper strong positive, but it was there. Like the test came back and said, yeah, you definitely do have it. And that's when Tina, she's had a bunch of patients that have Lyme disease as well. And they all go to a doctor in the States, Plattsburgh, New York, to a doctor called Dr. McShane. And I took a few months to get into her, like to get an appointment with her. And then so March of 2016, so this is over about 2.5 years since I got sick, then I'm finally, going to an appointment to, get some treatment finally. Yeah, and then from there it was, she was really amazing. I will say very expensive. But yeah, and she actually told me that the vast majority, I think like over 90% of her patients are from Canada. They are Canadian patients, like Canadian people who come from Canada to get treated in the U.S.
sounds like there's a big market for this test up here for us to get into.
Yeah.
Well, I've read there's thousands of people in Canada living with Lyme disease.
Yeah.
How did you get Lyme disease?
Right.
So you get Lyme disease. It's a tick-borne illness. So what happens is that a tick will bite like a deer or a mouse or a bird that has Lyme disease, and then now the tick has that in its system, and the tick is now like a carrier and it's infected. And then when the tick bites you, it can then transfer that bacteria into you when it's sucking on your blood. Because some of its juices, go into you and saliva and things like that.
We're all kind of mildly aware of watch out for ticks, be careful with ticks, don't work in your garden, be careful in the woods when you're camping. We are all aware. But I don't think we really know what they all look like if we've been bitten.
Usually the symptom that most people realize that they've been bit by a tick is that you get the bullseye rash.
Right.
And we don't think I got one because there's I think it's 30% of people, actually 20% or something that don't get any rash.
I've read that, yeah.
Right? So, and that's usually the indicator to people of oh, I need to go see a doctor because I was obviously bit by a tick. Because you're right, a lot of people don't see see the bite or see the tick on them until it just drops off, and then you get the bullseye rash, a day later or a week later or however long it takes. Yeah.
And so, of course, my limited knowledge of this topic is that the tick almost burrows into you, and it doesn't just drop off, but it does. And this is probably what happened in your case. You were bitten. It probably had its moment to transfer that Lyme disease to you, and it dropped off on its own, and unbeknownst to you.
Exactly, yeah. Because I don't remember ever being bit by a tick.
Right.
And that's the problem. And I was at a summer camp the summer before. I got sick in January. And I remember, in hindsight, them saying, oh, someone found a tick. Make sure you guys check yourselves.
Right.
Right. And, at the time I was just, oh yeah, I just, ran my hands over myself. I'm whatever. Right.
You're looking probably for something that feels like a mosquito bite or something you would know is there.
I was 14. I was yeah, whatever. Right. Sure. Yeah, and so it was just, I don't know if that's where I got bit, and the bacteria can lay dormant for a long time in your body before you actually show symptoms. And a lot of times they start showing symptoms after you get sick. So for me, pneumonia, I got pneumonia. That was the first major illness I had since probably getting bit. And then that's when the bacteria, because your immune system's weakened, that's when it can really multiply and then take hold in your body.
Now, dumb question, but did you get pneumonia because the Lyme disease was already present and your immune system was down, or was it a fluke?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
No? Okay.
I think it's just kind of basically the bacteria just kind of lays dormant in your body, just kind of building up. Because the thing with the bacteria, it's called the spirochete. So it's kind of like a corkscrew shaped bacteria. And it's very good at hiding in your body. Wow. It can go through, a lot of bacteria get stopped by things like mussels and things like that. So it stays generally contained as long as it's not in your blood necessarily, because then it can travel kind of wherever it wants. But the Lyme disease can get into muscle tissue, and it can pass through the blood-brain barrier, and it can go into your bloodstream and travel through your body that way. So it's very good at going places where your immune system can't detect it.
Right.
So I would think that, to get back to answering your question, I'm not sure if the pneumonia was I was more susceptible to the pneumonia because maybe my immune system was slightly compromised. I would say probably not, just because it took so long, and it was a couple of people in my family were kind of getting sick around the same time. Right. So I think it was more just it was just kind of normal bug that the Lyme disease took advantage of while my immune system was down, to take a stronghold in my body.
What I find so scary about it is the list of symptoms just goes on and on forever. Yeah. And I think Christa even told me one time that maybe an early suggestion from a doctor was it could have been puberty.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it.
Just speaking from personal experience, and I have two, one teenage and one preteen daughter. Those are some of the things, headaches that just won't go away, body achiness and dizziness. Those are things that we do go through in puberty. Yeah. So, I could see it being easily dismissed as that. And it takes, for me, you saw so many different doctors and specialists. It's if everyone got in one room and talked for 5 minutes, they probably would have figured it out, but that's not the way the system works, right?
Yeah, and that's the really interesting thing. about it is that, well, I shouldn't say interesting, the kind of unfortunate thing is that a lot of doctors I saw didn't take me seriously.
Of course.
And that's the thing. I remember specifically, near the end, right before I was like found out that, okay, it's definitely Lyme disease. I remember going to the emergency room and like just feeling so sick. And I was just, okay, like I can't sleep. I can't do anything. I just need to go in. Honestly, I don't know why I kept going in because they never did anything for me. But
you're desperate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the doctor, after waiting for like 4 hours, the doctor comes in, takes a look at my chart, talks to me for like a minute and a half, and says, "You're perfectly healthy. Go seek psychiatric help." And then walked out.
Those are also symptoms of depression. So
Exactly.
It must be incredibly hard. I mean, on the one hand, I want to be angry at that doctor in my imagination. And on the other hand, I get it.
No, and that's the thing is that I completely understand like psychiatric illnesses and things like that. Like those definitely need to be diagnosed, and it needs to be brought to people's attention as like, look, maybe this is something that you need to get checked out. But the issue is that it was so often used as a last resort of, it's like, well, we've tried everything else, like we don't know what else to try, so it must be this, instead of being like, well, maybe it's this, or maybe maybe you need to see about getting some counseling, see if that helps with anything. And that's what bothered me the most, is that 9 out of 10 times when I saw doctors, it was, we've tried everything else, so therefore it must just be in your head. Right?
That must be incredibly frustrating. Did you experience any self-doubt at any point where you're like,
tons.
Am I losing it?
Yeah. And that's something like, it's definitely very like damaging to your mindset, where it's like, and I know a lot of doctors also accuse me of like, oh, she just wants to get out of school, she doesn't want to go to school.
I bet you the only thing you wanted to do was to just
Exactly.
get to school and have a social life and get involved in clubs and
Exactly.
groups
And play basketball.
Yeah.
Krista loves.
Because
love
before I
basketball?
got
Yeah.
sick, I was playing like rep basketball, and I was also studying like taekwondo.
So
I was very active.
To lose that level of activity is also a blow to your system. When you're
Yes.
used to being active and that's cut off, that's a lot of moving parts at once for you.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And like, I was always one, like, I really enjoy school. Like, I just do. And so that's when it's always funny when like doctors try to say that to me. Or like, because they, I was like 15, and so they would just talk to my mom, right? And she's like, oh, she just doesn't want to go to school. Like, just send her to school, she'll be fine. And mom's like, no, she wants to go to school. It's that she can't, and that's the problem. So
One more time, go Dr. Tina Rogers.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I was very impressed at just, how quickly, just based on me speaking.
Yeah.
Because I'm a million times better now. Where like before, I had a slight stutter even. And I talked like very slow, very laboriously. Like, I had to think through everything. Like, my brain was just like put on the turtle mode.
So your parents must have noticed that shift.
Yeah.
And were trying to explain this to your doctors and specialists. And it was...
Yeah. And that's the thing also, is that like a lot of these were like, like the headaches and the fatigue were a lot of like sudden onset, but like a lot of like the speech stuff too. And that kind of stuff, that was very slow progress, where, it took 6 months to a year before I was like, where it was like, oh yeah, there's a really noticeable difference in my speech pattern changes. And so like, I know I didn't notice it. My parents did notice it a bit, as well. But just having that outside person look in and be like, oh yeah, that's like not normal speech patterns, right? Yeah, I mean, it's also just kind of damaging to like your self-esteem when you like can't think through things properly, or like how hold a conversation, right? Where it's like, well, like I really want to meet friends in high school and things like that, between the fact that I'm only there 2 or 3 days a week, and I can't like hold a conversation, and I can't think straight.
And already at that age, I mean, you're 19 now, so you're growing up, but already at that age, your self-esteem in social situations is questioned, and you're not sure of yourself and your place in the world. And I mean this sensitively, I really do. I want to be delicate. You don't want to be the weird sick kid that's trying to make you want to just make friends, right? Yeah. So.
And I always felt this like weird kind of like need to explain why I wasn't at school,
right?
Because I was like, I really did enjoy school, and I would say I don't really like the grades that I got, but like my parents always say, like they were really good grades considering how much I missed. Like in my mindset, like I was like, the kid that really liked school. I consider myself relatively smart. And then like I just felt like not being there, I had to explain it to people. And for, you know, even when it wasn't diagnosed, I always had to talk to my teachers like at the beginning of the semester, be like, look, it was really weird for like the first 2 years where it's like, I have this undiagnosed, like really bad chronic headaches that, you know, I've been to a bunch of specialists, but they don't know what it is. So I'm going to be missing a lot of class. Right? At least when I got the diagnosis of Lyme disease, I could go up to and be like, look, I have Lyme disease.
Here's a paper from my doctor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Can I ask, sorry, I'm kind of monopolizing the conversation here. Can I ask what the treatment is for Lyme disease? I don't know.
Yeah. So this is where things get complicated.
Okay.
Because there's kind of two schools of thought on Lyme disease in general, because the medical community is very divided. The US and Canada both follow the same like official guidelines. And the general consensus officially, you know, of like what the governments say that you should or shouldn't be treating, how you should be treating, is that Lyme disease is pretty easy to diagnose. It's pretty easy to treat with just a short bout of antibiotics. I believe in Canada, it's like 21 or 28 days of antibiotics. And then after that, you're done, you're good. Any remaining symptoms that you have is due to some other illness. It's not part of Lyme disease. You're free of Lyme disease, and treating you further for Lyme disease is just going to be hiding the other symptoms, and it's not going to be helping you figure out what else is wrong.
Okay.
And then the other school of thought that's kind of more, that is not practiced in Canada because you can't. In the US, there's some states like in New York where I got treated, where they allow you to, where there's protection for doctors, where they can treat long-term antibiotics without losing their license.
Right.
Canada doesn't have that. So in the States, the doctor that I went to, you know, it's like in her area with her colleagues, they view Lyme disease that, you know, it's very complex. It's actually called like the great imitator, because it can be mistaken for so many other diseases. So like meningitis, arthritis, even like stroke, heart disease, Bell's palsy, Parkinson's, even like multiple sclerosis as well. And that's why, and so, you know, because it's so hard to diagnose, when you get a diagnosis, usually it's pretty late on in the like progression.
Illness? Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like in my case, it was like 2.5 years in. Right. So, so their kind of thought is that, okay, well, if you didn't catch it early, you need to go on long-term antibiotics. And I was on long-term antibiotics because I was being treated in the States.
Long-term mean?
So I was on March of 2016, I started treatment with antibiotics. I think I've been off for a little over a year.
Okay.
Or a little under a year, sorry. So like 8 months.
Yeah.
Something like that. So it was definitely like kind of 2.5, 3 years of antibiotics. Because the doctor treats me, like how she treats her patients is that she treats you until you're symptom-free for 3 months.
Okay.
So what that does is that ensures that Lyme disease is gone, you don't have any more symptoms, and then a little bit more until, like, just to make sure everything is gone. And you're not using, like, just antibiotics. Because if I were going to be treated in Canada, I would have gotten probably, like, doxycycline or, like, just one antibiotic for the 21 or 28 days, however long, for that short time period. And then it's like, okay, you're good to go. You don't have Lyme disease anymore. Anything else is something else, right? Whereas, you know, when I was being treated with Dr. McShane, it was that I was on probably 3 or 4 or 5 different antibiotics at the same time.
Okay.
With different, like, regimens of, like, different, at one point I was on, like, different pulse schedules. So, like, I take these antibiotics for, like, X many days, and then I take a little break, and then I take these next set of antibiotics for another X many days, and then you keep cycling through, because the Lyme disease can actually, like, it can be very difficult to treat. With antibiotics, like, you have to use many different types. I was actually at one point on a medication that they used to use to treat, like, tuberculosis.
Wow.
And things like that, right? Because it's just, you just need to throw everything at it, because it can quickly become immune to different antibiotics and that. So yeah, there's definitely 2 very different schools of thought on how that should be done. And in Canada, part of the reason also that I couldn't, because we were slightly suspicious that I had Lyme disease, you know, based on, you know, some research that my mom was doing and things like that.
Okay, so you were suspicious that you had it.
Yeah, so we were slightly suspicious, you know, we were kind of thinking maybe I have Lyme disease. And And we also couldn't get any doctor to take it seriously because we wanted to do another test. Like in Canada, said, look, we know the last one came back negative, but it's been a long time since that one. We want to try again because we know there's issues with the test in Canada. And so, but yeah, we just couldn't get, I actually saw a specialist at McMaster that was an infectious disease doctor.
Wow.
And he would not test me for Lyme disease. And I completely, after doing more research on it and understanding kind of the nuances of the situation, I understand, because Lyme disease is very a taboo subject in Canada, especially among physicians.
Why?
Honestly, I'm not sure. It's because it requires, because like just Lyme disease in general, with the two schools of thought on how it should be treated and whether it's like, A, it's either a really simple disease, really easy to treat, or B, it's very complex and it can take a really long time to treat if it's caught in later stages.
So you feel like it's a schools of thought
It's
war.
a schools of thought war, yeah. And in Canada, they've subscribed to it's easy. Nothing's complicated about it. And in Canada, you can lose your license prescribing more than that, like 21 or 28 days of antibiotics. And I know of a doctor. I can't remember who he was exactly, but I remember reading about a doctor or hearing about him when we were trying to figure out, okay, if this is Lyme disease, can we get treated in Canada? And he was an older gentleman who was treating people with long-term antibiotics for Lyme disease because he was fine if they revoked his license because he was planning on retiring soon anyway. So
I'm going to save as many people as I can on my way down. I love
That's exactly what he did. And he did get his license revoked because he was treating a bunch of people with long-term antibiotics. And guess what? It was working.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, so and I completely understand. My family doctor was great. Like, he's a really great guy. I really like him. But, his hands really were tied because, like, he can't prescribe me more than, a certain amount of antibiotics without being at severe risk of losing his license. So that's the biggest problem in Canada is that doctors aren't protected if they think that's the right course of action.
So then my mind goes right to, okay, you were very fortunate. Your family was able to take you to New York, get the expensive test, and then start treatments, which you obviously had to pay for.
Yes.
What about the families that don't have those resources?
Exactly.
And they probably can't get that covered through their insurance because of these laws then, right?
Yes.
So it's all coming out of pocket for those other families.
Correct.
Or they're not being treated in this way.
Exactly.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm just very fortunate. Like, my family is definitely not wealthy, but, we were fine. And I know even for my family, on two incomes, both my parents work, it was it was hard for them as well because it's a lot of money between not even including the gas and the time that it takes to drive down to New York and to travel there and then just the doctor's appointments are really expensive, and then all the antibiotics because they're not covered in Canada, right? Because they're prescribed in the U.S. You can't get them filled and have it covered by like OHIP or anything like that in Canada.
Well, I'm very happy they were able to do it for you, and
you're
on the other side of this.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I really don't know what people would do if they can't get treatment because, if they get treated in Canada but they still have symptoms afterwards, it's just kind of like, well, tough luck, right? So, and then you generally will just continue getting worse, right? Obviously, if it doesn't get treated,
right?
Because it tends to affect like the three main things it affects is like your brain, heart, and your nervous system. Those tends to be the things.
Nothing important or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. So like it's just, I don't know what people do if they can't afford the treatment, and that's something that's, in Canada we're starting to realize that, hey, wait, this is a problem. Even just the more awareness is being spread, because like in 2005, there were 144 cases of Lyme disease in Canada. I believe in Canada, I don't think it's just Ontario. And then in 2017, there was just over 2,000 cases. So like that's a massive increase.
Yeah.
And a lot of experts are saying it's probably a lot higher than that.
Right.
Because it's misdiagnosed so
hard
much.
to diagnose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
because people get misdiagnosed with like, oh, it's just arthritis, it's it's MS, it's Bell's palsy, it's whatever, and then it doesn't get treated. And there are people, I was reading an article, I've seen a couple different articles of like little kids who have gotten Lyme disease and they can't get treated in Canada.
Wow.
Like there's a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old, and things like that, where it's just like, okay, like what are they supposed to do? But
Yeah, that's tricky. Okay, I'm very interested in what you're studying in school now. So obviously you're on the other side of Lyme disease. It sounds like maybe becoming a bit of an advocate for treatment, which I love. I want to keep you safe in like an office job or a building with walls.
Yeah.
Why zoology?
I also want to point out that
Okay.
Krista's family also loves camping,
Right,
and
yes.
goes camping every summer, spends weeks out in
Okay.
the wilderness.
Yep.
And I was always admired the fact that this family does not live in fear
Right. And
of ticks.
I feel like I would, but of course
Yeah.
I have never been in your shoes.
Yeah.
So, and I hear that you have a lot of animals through Marshall.
Yes.
Tell us all about that.
So I'm going into, I just started, just did my first couple days of classes at University of Guelph,
Awesome.
doing a Bachelor of
Congratulations.
Science.
Great.
With
And she got a
zoology.
scholarship.
Yeah, I got a scholarship for that, one of the entrance scholarships. Yeah, so that's good. So I chose zoology because, well, I want to become a veterinarian. That's something that I've been interested in since I was very young. And zoology was kind of, and I'm also like very interested in all things like kind of like nature and wildlife and that kind of stuff. Like if you take a look at my bookshelf, it's all, I think I probably have about a dozen at least or more field guides,
Right.
like field guides to the different plants and trees and reptiles and amphibians and butterflies. I think I have 3 different field guides on insects.
Krista has like an encyclopedic knowledge of
Yeah.
Do you?
all these rides home from school.
Yeah.
I could ask her about anything.
Are you picking her brain about, because now he's doing backyard bird photography, right?
Oh, yeah.
Marshall's into this
No,
bird
she's
photography.
got answers in there.
I love it.
And along with this, what I call this encyclopedic knowledge, like she's like walking National Geographic magazine. She has this uncanny way of explaining things too that make it really, like, I'll try to understand something for years, trying to understand what something is. It could be something even political, right, from her political courses. And then Krista explains it to me. I was like, oh, I'm like 30 years her senior.
And you
So
just
somehow-
cracked the code.
Yeah.
Right there.
I'm like, oh, how come nobody else could explain that?
That makes me think you should teach, obviously.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
Let's,
Yeah, so
one thing at a time. You just started university.
Exactly. So, I've always really loved just like the outdoors and spending time outside. Like, with all my field guides, I like going out and, trying to find, identify like what's that flower, what's that bug, things like that. I'm also very interested in fungi. That's something that's kind of been a recent kind of passion for me. But yeah, like I just absolutely love spending tons of time outside and doing that stuff. And yeah, it's always in the back of my mind, like, yeah, I really don't want to get bit again.
Yeah.
Because I know my doctor has warned me extensively about that, like in the US, because she says she's had some people who have gotten bit like a second time. And it doesn't respond to treatment very well, like the standard course of treatment for the second time.
I didn't even consider that.
Yeah,
That could be a
so I
problem.
hadn't really either until it was just kind of my last appointment with her, and she mentioned that. It's like, oh, yeah, like it's again one of those things. It's like, okay, I just got to make sure that I don't go back there again. That I make sure you like tuck your pants into your socks and wear good shoes and all that.
I've heard all that stuff, and of course I've never had Lyme disease, but yeah, I'm out in the garden in flip-flops.
Yeah.
I'm not being careful. Maybe I should be.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like tall grasses. And things like that. As you look out your window
Yeah,
into
we've
the
got
beautiful
lots of
tall
them.
grasses in your backyard.
So they like tall grasses?
Tall grasses, yeah, because what they do is they hang out like on tall grasses, somewhat in leaf litter as well, where they just kind of hang out and they just wait until something comes by and brushes against them, and then they grab on and it's like, is this food? Is this not?
Kind of like lice, right? Like, don't they hop to the next bed sort of thing?
Yeah, it's just kind of, it's like, oh, if something brushes up against me, I'll grab onto it and see if it's lunch.
Right.
Yeah, and there is only certain kinds of ticks that carry Lyme disease. Like there's the back-legged tick, the Lone Star tick, I want to say, and there are some species that just don't carry it or can't carry it. And I don't know, I know there have been sightings of those kinds of ticks like in Ontario, in southern Ontario. I remember one of my teachers came into class one morning. She's like, "Oh, Christa, I was so like I was so worried like all weekend because my husband showed me an article how like they found a tick like one of the Lyme disease carrying ticks. That specific tick didn't have Lyme disease, but one of the species that could be a carrier, like right by there, like right in their neighborhood, right. So I mean, it's definitely, and with changing climates and everything getting warmer, Canada's definitely going to be a hot spot for Lyme disease, as those kinds of ticks are able to move forward.
Even those numbers that you just told us from 2005 to 2017 is kind of a little staggering.
Yeah, right? No, it is definitely. And it's obviously, as I mentioned, they think it's a lot higher than that. But so.
Can we talk more about your interest in fungi?
Yeah, definitely.
I had a really cool grandma. She passed away a few years ago at 94, still lived on her own. She was really awesome. But my uncle, her son, and her were very into fungi. And they knew when they would come across something edible, they'd get super excited. Yeah. I know morels.
Morels.
They get very excited about morels. Delicious. So my uncle has in his kitchen, they live up by a lake in the Kawarthas, or he does. He has the mushroom guide right in his kitchen. And sometimes if we're just heading out to go on the boat or, if we're heading out for a little walk, he just flips through to check what's in season if he's on it, and he's always got his eyes peeled for it. So are you into that kind of stuff?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I actually joined the Mycological Society of Toronto. So they do like different forays, like outings. So it's basically a group of people who like fungi.
Yeah.
And we go out and I've only been on, I believe, 2 different forays, they call them. So like outings, and everyone drives up to a certain place and then people guide you through a hike and everyone collects any mushrooms they find. And then at the end you bring it onto a giant table and everything gets spread out. And then people who know way more than I do, who it's just amazing to hear these people talk about it because they've memorized like all the scientific names. They know like these things that even to my eyes look all the same, like all these little like I don't know if you heard of like turkey tail mushrooms, but then
never heard of this.
So like there's like turkey tail mushrooms and then violet tooth polypores and like all these things that to me, honestly, for the longest time I thought they were all the same thing.
Right.
And then and then I went to one of these meetings. I'm like, oh, they're not all the same thing. That's good to know.
Oh, that's great.
But I'm definitely very interested in that. I collected a few morels. We went on a hike thing to look for morels specifically. I didn't find any, unfortunately.
A foraging. I guess that's where the foray is.
Foraging. Yeah, exactly. But we ended up giving a ride home to a lady who had 4 of them, so she gave me 2. So that
that's
was very
so nice. Oh, I love the trade in fungi.
Exactly.
My father used to find puffballs behind the forest, or behind our house. There was a forest in Forest Heights. And he would make us like fried puffball sandwiches for dinner. And I
haven't tried it, but I really want to find some. I'm only just kind of starting, as I'm feeling better.
Yeah.
I really want to go out and, like really look in depth for those kinds of things. I've started a little collection of, they're called like bracket fungi, so the fungi that you would find, growing on like trees where they're hard.
Oh yeah,
to the touch.
They're beautiful.
Yeah, they are, right? And so like I've collected some of those.
There's a lot of that up in our ESPA up here.
Yep. Yeah, so I've collected a few of those, and I'm gonna see about maybe trying to do some kind of creative project with them or something like that, because I just think they're absolutely beautiful.
Do we have poisonous mushrooms in?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah,
around here.
Yeah. Like touching it is perfectly fine as long as you don't like don't like handle it and then go stick your fingers in your mouth. Like maybe don't let like your 3-year-old or 4-year-old do that. But generally there's nothing that will hurt you from just touching the mushrooms. Definitely don't eat the mushroom unless you're positive you know what it is.
What's the scariest one that you've seen?
I haven't seen ones that I've like personally seen. I know like a bunch of them, they're just like a lot of them, they're like, yeah, it's edible, but it really doesn't taste good.
Oh, like right? Just not a good one.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, in theory you could, but it's pretty chewy. I know we've come across some like false morels, which
they're like trickers, like they trick you in nature.
Yeah. They if you see a morel next to a false morel, they look nothing alike.
Okay.
But I guess if you're like a real amateur and you don't really know what you're doing, you could potentially mistake it. There's 2 different types of it. The giga ones, like a big one, and then like a slightly smaller one. 2 different like species, and one of them is edible, and then one of them is not. It's more like you'd be fine if you just ate a little bit of it, but it's more like if you eat it over long periods of time, it builds up in your
Poisoning
system.
yourself, kind of.
Yeah, because your body can't flush it out, so it just builds up. So if you eat lots of it, then it's going to cause some kidney problems and some liver problems, and not fun stuff. But I think for the most part, like, mushrooms aren't going to hurt you as long as you don't eat them. If you don't know what it is. If you're interested in starting to do mushrooms, like join something like a mycological society, and you can learn from people who know a lot more than you do, so that you don't, it's like, oh, all these mushrooms I used to think were just one kind, right?
Do you guys ever do something like I like to thrift. I'm not that great at it. My friends are amazing at it. My friends they can spot something a mile away. But we sometimes do something called the snap and walk. So instead of purchasing, we'll take a picture, we'll share it with each other, and then we'll continue on our way. Yep. Do you do anything like that with mushrooms sometimes?
Yeah. So actually, I do this with a lot of different things. There's actually an app or like a program. It's called iNaturalist. And it's basically, it was made by some university students as like a project to help with like citizen science projects. So basically, if you have the app on your phone and say you're like out in the garden, you're going for a walk, and you say, oh, that's a really cool flower. What is it? You can take a picture of it, and then the like AI system on the phone or on the app will look at that photo and say, okay, it'll try to tell you what it is. And I found it to have like an extremely high degree of accuracy.
Oh, that's great.
And it's so helpful if you're like starting out and learning, and there's just so much stuff out there. That it's really handy to have.
What was that called? Did you say?
Yeah, it's iNaturalist.
iNaturalist.
Yeah.
I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah. No, and it's really great. I absolutely love it. It's probably like one of my most used apps on my phone.
That's great.
Yeah, and I think currently I have like just over 100 observations. I know a lot of people on there have like thousands of observations. Right. And then you can post it. And people who know more than you, or people who are they can look at it and say, yep, that's exactly what that is, and they'll confirm it, or they'll say, oh no, that's not what it is, it's this. And then so you get feedback on it, and I think if you get 2 people, or is it 3 people, saying the same thing, like who have confirmed that yes, this is definitely what it is, then it becomes research grade. And you get like distribution maps, and it helps scientists see like maybe where an invasive species is spreading, or maybe where like, oh, this bird hasn't been seen in this area in the past 5 years. So maybe we need to go and check that out, right? And see, it's just no one like putting any information in, or are they really gone? Yeah. That kind of stuff. So like that's really cool. And it's really great for trying to identify things.
That's the one, for as evil as, social media and the phones and all of that stuff is, that ESP-like awareness of your surroundings and being able to share good, positive, fun, educational information is what makes it worth it to me. You know, like how wonderful is that? You could connect with somebody so far away, or maybe next door.
Yeah, exactly.
About this thing that you've seen. Yeah,
Christa, the 3 of us all live just within minutes of each other here in Waterloo. And Christa, I think, has really utilized the space, this forest that's close to us, as well as some of the care you've done with animals. Can you talk a bit about that?
I'm interested in that.
Yeah, so so I actually work with a wildlife thing. It's called the National Wildlife Rehabilitation Foundation, or the NWRF, and that's a Canada-wide kind of foundation that works with rehabilitation centers and rehabbers. We're predominantly in Ontario right now, but we have a center in Alberta, I believe we send money to, and basically what we do is we get supplies and organize donations, and send money to rehab centers, because they really generally don't get much funding at all, and they rely on public donations.
And these are for animals?
Correct. Okay. Yeah, it's for wildlife. And I've also done some wildlife rehabilitation through the founder of the NWRF, and with and some of the different rehabbing groups as well. So I predominantly do cottontails, which are those like rabbits that you often see, in your backyard, and people try to keep out of their gardens because they eat all the plants and things like that.
I always throw them extra food. I'm like, you can stay as long as you want, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. So
we love them.
Yeah. So I've been doing rehabbing with cottontails for 5 years.
So is this if they are, I'm naive about this, injured or sick or what's
generally
happening?
I do orphaned or injured like baby cottontails. So I get them in just a batch we got in earlier this spring was ones that were probably like a day old, if that.
So little mice size.
Little tiny. Yeah, they're maybe 2 inches, I want to say. I don't know, I'm terrible with measurements.
I think I've
but
seen because we lived near a forest growing up, my friends and I did try to help a family of orphaned bunnies. They didn't last long because we were children, and putting them in shoe boxes with little dresses and chairs and stuff was probably not what they needed, but I've seen them and they're so helpless and tiny.
And I mean, some problems is that a lot of people think they've been abandoned when they haven't, because the mothers only come back every like dawn, like kind of like early in the morning and kind of late at night kind of timing. And they're really
eating and
and maybe like once during the day or something like that, and that's like the mom just kind of sits on the nest, the babies feed for maybe 5 minutes, and then because the milk is so rich in protein and fats and things like that, that's all the babies need, right? And then the mom's gone, because the longer the mom sits on the nest, it draws attention to like from predators and all that. So if you think you have like a cottontail nest in your backyard or in wherever, and you
let
think
it be, or
maybe if you think maybe there's like not if the mother's abandoned them, or maybe got hit by a car or something, what you can do, you can either use flour or string, and so either put like string across the nest, and then check back the next day, or check back every few hours and see if the string's been moved, because then that means the mom's been back. You can do same with like flour, depending on where it is. If it's not windy,
like footprinting
it's just to see if the flour line has been disturbed.
Oh, cool.
Right. That doesn't work if it's kind of windy.
Right.
String method is the best way to do it. And then you can also do what's called the finger test, which is you stick your finger in the nest, and then if it feels warm and the baby bunnies are wriggling around, they're doing good.
Okay.
If the nest is kind of cold, or they're not moving at all and it's kind of cold, then you need to bring them inside because they're not doing well.
Okay.
And cottontails, of course, they're bottom of the food chain. They're not exactly the most hardy of animals, so they go downhill very quickly.
But they're just so darn cute.
Yes, they are. They are very cute. We actually have 2 right now that we're just trying to raise up and get out.
So then that's once they're feeling well and healthy and strong, then you release them.
Yep, we release them. I have quite a few different spots that I release them that have good, like it has like a good water source. It has lots of plants that they love, and shelter and things like that. And so that's kind of stuff what I do specifically with like the rehabbing side of it. Just in April, I was just a volunteer with since the foundation started in 2015. But just in April, I was voted onto the board of directors. So now I'm like a director at large. Yeah. So that was really cool. I helped the founder. I'm very close to the founder, who's Vicky Genetos. She's like a really great woman, like tons of knowledge about animals. She could talk your ear off about, anything and everything. I've learned so much from her, but, so like I just do a bunch of stuff, with her getting food. We mix, so much dog food, because dog food gets used for, raccoons. I don't know why I couldn't think of that word.
Oh, that's okay.
Raccoons. And we also send it up to a bear rescue in Northern Ontario, because the bears eat dog food, because it's got, all the proteins and all that, for supplementing with other, like fish and fresh foods and vegetables and things like that they get, obviously. And we mix up thousands of pounds of dog food a year. Like probably, I would not be surprised if it's like over 2 tons of dog food that we get donated, and then we mix up into appropriate, like mixing the high quality food with the low quality food, and making sure that it's all, the right sizes for baby raccoons versus bigger raccoons versus food that's going to be put out in the bush when you release the raccoons. And these
are you talking about
things.
both moist and dry food?
See, sometimes they use moist food, like wet food, for like baby raccoons. I'm not 100% up to date on raccoons. I've done cottontail. Cottontails is my expertise. I've done a bit of squirrels. I've helped out with some raccoons, but I've never had them, like personally, to take care of them, because they take a massive amount of time and space, and so messy, so stinky.
Yeah.
But But yeah, so I believe they use the wet food with the raccoons sometimes, just to kind of help supplement when they're transitioning from formula to like more harder food and things like that. Don't quote me on that, but I believe so. Yeah, so it's always we're always busy, always finding things to do, and trying to get more donations and things like that and all that.
Something that always comes to mind when I talk to Christa and other veterinarians is I'm not sure how this would really wreak havoc on me emotionally when things don't go well with animals.
Sure.
And somehow people like Christa, that's the work they want to go into. I always say they somehow have to, I guess, check it at the door or something, or deal with it in a different way.
Yeah.
There's no way you're not emotional.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you do get very attached to these little cottontails, and unfortunately, in general, cottontails do not have a very high survival rate. With the kind of like methods that I have and that we've used, we have generally very good success. If we have a litter of 5 bunnies or that we can release 4, we're doing good.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that's kind of our average when we get them in. If we get them right away, the problem is when they've been at someone else's house for a day or a day and a half or 2 days, because they're so fragile. They go downhill very quickly. So if, obviously the sooner you can get them to a proper rehab facility or someone who actually knows, what they're doing, it's all well and good to like try and do it yourself. But,
Right.
With cottontails, definitely don't try. It will end in heartache because, I've taken years and years and years to kind of develop, the method that we have. And I'm actually working on a cottontail manual. The founder, Vicky Genetos, she actually wrote, because she was rehabbing in California for a while, squirrels down there. And so she did up the Squirrel Bible,
Right.
which is like a manual on how to rehab squirrels. So now I'm working on the Cottontail Bible.
I love it.
Yeah. So, because like I've generally had really good success when compared to a lot of the rehab centers. And they've always asked us, like, okay, how, like, we can't get these cottontails to survive. Like, if we get 1 cottontail out of a batch of 5, we're doing great, right? So I've been going to a few different centers. We've been talking with people, and they would all just love like a written copy of something to say, okay, how do we deal with these cottontails? Because they can be so finicky, and they can be, and just the littlest thing that's off, then they all go down the deep end. Mm-hmm. Just a lot of patience, and it is definitely a lot of emotional toll on yourself. And I can generally be somewhat detached. I won't say detached, but like, it doesn't bother me to the same extent as it bothers like my mom or my sister, who they're very sensitive. For me, it's just kind of like, I accept it as, yes, this is, it's very sad. I obviously don't like it if, when something dies or, it's getting sicker, but it's just kind of my mindset of like, okay, I did my best. I just need to, because there are still other animals that
help as many as I can
need to do stuff with. So like, I can't get just tied up in one little animal.
For sure.
I'm not gonna lie. With cottontails, it does help just a little bit that they all look identical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
Hey, as we start to wrap up, if you have a final question, that's good. But I was going to ask before that.
Yeah, go ahead.
When I think of Christa, I think about how the combination of her Lyme disease, how she tackled and endured that, what she did with the time she did have with educating herself. I can't think of anybody more armed for this career in terms of like it all kind of is like a tapestry, right? Like
I see it now.
It's I don't say it's about many people, young people, but I picture like really remarkable things ahead for her, and lots of choice and lots of options. And again, I see it as this of course you never wanted Lyme disease, but you sure did. It's almost like you used it.
You set it. It's helped to set your path.
Oh, it has, and that's the thing.
Strengthen your person, right?
Yeah, and like I like someone asked me, it's like, well, if you go back, like obviously, like you wouldn't want to have Lyme disease again, right? No. But it's that thing of it's that like it definitely shaped kind of who I've become, especially with like my work ethic and it forced me to be a lot more like communicate with people a lot better, like with my teachers and ask for help when I need it. Yeah. And so like it's been very, very good. It's like the silver lining, right? So while the whole thing was pretty awful and just a nightmare in and of itself, There was some, that light at the end of the tunnel, the silver lining that, makes it worth it, like the struggle that I went through. So, yeah.
You're that strong cottontail who's making it through the
exactly.
treatment, who's going to come out the other side.
Yep.
As you talk to us, and again, with Marshall's point of he couldn't imagine someone better for this line of work. When someone says veterinarian, of course, I get my Sesame Street image of someone in an office taking care of dogs and cats and whatever. But it's quite obvious that you're going to take this far, and you're going to be outdoors a lot.
Yes.
And you're going to be saving all the creatures that need saving.
Yeah, that's probably what I'm going to do. Probably do, large animal, small animal, a little bit of exotic, a little bit of wildlife. I think I'm just going to dabble in everything. We'll see how it goes, though.
And it must be very exciting, actually, to be able to go to, going to university. You're probably you're in it to win it.
Oh, yeah, especially because I had to take a 5th year of high school. Yep. And so, now I'm with my friends at University of Guelph, and it's just all really nice to just, okay, now it's done. I can start my life, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Christa doing a 5th year, it was kind of like, oh, man, if all the students who are ready to go on, but that's the hand she was dealt, right?
I'm not a believer in everything happens for a reason myself, but these things that happen, as we said earlier, this is going to just make you a stronger person.
Oh, definitely.
And already has to get through everything that you need to in the next 4 years, or whoever knows how many more years you might be educating yourself. I wish you so much luck, and I hope that you come back and talk to us and tell us what you're up to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Christa.
This month on Bonn Park, we're giving our ad space to local charities and nonprofits. Today I want to talk to you about A Child's Voice Foundation and their program Big Hair for Little Kids, which is a local volunteer organized event in support of Angel Hair for Kids. This is the only program of its kind in Canada that provides human or synthetic hair wigs or specialized hair systems for children from financially disadvantaged families who have lost their hair as a result of a medical condition or a treatment for a medical condition. It takes 10 to 15 ponytails to make just one wig. The hair donations are sent to professional wig manufacturers, and around $2,000 is budgeted by the foundation to create one wig or hair system for a child. To date, they've raised over $110,000 and over 1,000 ponytails with this program. So this year's event, Big Hair for Little Kids, is on Saturday, February 29th, 2020 at 8 p.m. at the Brantford Army, Navy, and Air Force Club. So get involved and help a kid out. Find more information at canadahelps.org. We'll link to their site in our show notes. Thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung.